Communication is a diverse, evolving field. We don't all ask the same questions or even agree on what counts as knowledge. Rather than offering a single story, communication theory spans different traditions, methods, and tensions. There is no single way to map the field of communication. The model I use here from Anderson and Baym maps communication theory across four philosophical domains. These are not rigid boxes. They are overlapping perspectives that help us reflect on our assumptions about reality, knowledge, and the purpose of theory. It's not the only way to view the field, but it's the one that's especially helpful for recognizing complexity across tradition, from interpersonal communication to media studies, organizational discourse to digital activism. Anderson and Baum's approach is helpful because it captures philosophical differences across a wide range of communication theories without forcing everything into one method or ideology. Theorists in the foundational empirical domain believe in objective reality, measurable behavior, and causal patterns. Scholars like Harold Laswell asked, who says what to whom through what channel with what effect, shaping the foundations of media effects research. Shannon and Weaver's transmission model treated communication like signal transfer, emphasizing clarity and efficiency. Other key figures like Edward Bernays, Paul Lazarsfeld, George Erbner, Blumler, and Cates laid the groundwork for theories like agenda setting, uses and gratification, and cultivation theory. Even today, this approach shapes political campaigns, media psychology, public health messaging, and quantitative content analysis. Next, in the foundational analytical domain, communication is examined through structural logics and systems of power. It draws from Marxist, structuralist, and critical traditions that assume systems, not individuals, shape how we communicate. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the foundational groundwork for rhetoric, ethics, and philosophical inquiry in communication. Later, scholars like Gramsci, Schiller, and Moscow explored how media reflects and reinforces dominant ideologies. In the Frankfurt School, thinkers like Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse also contributed to this tradition. They examined how mass media and culture industries produce ideological control under capitalism. From audience commodity theory to the political economy of communication, this approach asks who controls the discourse, what's get framed as common sense, who benefits from the structures of knowledge and representation. This domain helps us understand how communication maintains power and how it might disrupt it. In the reflexive empirical quadrant, communication is seen as situated, relational, and interpretive. Scholars use qualitative, ethnographic, and narrative methods to understand how people experience, perform, and negotiate to create meaning in everyday life. It values context, lived experiences, and the co construction of knowledge. Theorists like Altman and Taylor, Baxter and Montgomery, and Stella Toomey explore how identity, intimacy, and conflict emerge in interaction. In health and organizational communication, scholars like Mohan Datta and Karen Ashcraft study how cultural narratives, labor, and structure shape human experience. Even James Carey, in his ritual model of communication, reminds us that communication is not just about information, it's about belonging, repetition, and meaning making across time. From pedagogy of the oppressed to information disorder and culture centered health communication, this domain asks how do people make sense of the world in context of inequality, misinformation, or marginalization? How are communication practices shaped by culture, history, and lived struggles? This domain helps us understand communication as an act of awareness, resistance, and transformation rooted in experience, not abstraction. Lastly, the reflexive analytical domain questions the very foundations of knowledge, meaning, and identity. Scholars like Stuart Hall, Nancy Fraser, Marshall McLuhan, Jean Baudrillard, and Shoshana Zuboff interrogate how communication produces and challenges structures of power, from media representation to algorithmic surveillance. Drawing from post structuralism, feminist theory, critical race theory, and media theory, this domain explores how communication is deeply entangled with inequality, visibility, and epistemic violence. From performance of personal narrative to the oppositional gaze to networked publics, these works ask whose knowledge is legitimized? How do media encode radicalized and gendered logics? What does it mean to exist inside a platform society? Also, this is a space I work within. My research on closed Facebook groups, feminist YouTube debates, or gendered Twitter discourse all explore how voice, visibility, and resistance are negotiated in the global south. I study how digital spaces offer refuge, expression, and contestation, particularly for those historically silenced. And like others in this domain, I see communication not just as expression, but as a political act of reclaiming space and rewriting meaning. Each of these domains offers something valuable. Foundational empirical gives us clarity and prediction. Foundational analytical helps us understand the structure and the critique. Reflexive empirical offers lived nuance and relational insight. And reflexive analytical sharpens our questions about power, identity, and meaning. And none of them alone can capture the richness of communication. That's the strength of Anderson and Baym's model. It doesn't reduce the field to one method or one ideology. Instead, it gives us a tool to map differences, to locate ourselves, and to stay curious about how theory shapes our world.